Good morning, everyone. My name is Seth Goodstein. I'm the Queens County Regional Security Director for the Community Security Initiative. Today, I'd like to introduce for our Consultants Corner webinar, Ilya Romansky. Ilya?
Thank you very much, Seth, and thanks for everyone who's joining. I know it's a holiday week, so thank you very much, all of you, for your time. Please remember that this will be recorded, so if anything is of interest to you in particular, please review this video at your convenience. All of these are always available through our playlists and will be distributed later on, okay? We will try to stick to 1 hour's time frame, so I'll have to be quick. Please remember that at any point when you have questions, there's a fantastic team at CSI that's available to help you navigate the intricacies of project implementation. Please don't feel like you're stuck and alone, okay? So the idea for us to do this is to share with the community and also incentivize any questions that come to mind. However challenging they may be, we may not be able to answer them right away, but we'll certainly offer you as much guidance as we can. All right, so without further ado, today we're going to be discussing project implementation and commissioning. Don't worry about the terminology I'm going to throw your way. I'll try to make it as plain language as possible. There will be a couple of terms here that I'll mention, and I'll try to explain them. If any questions arise, please remember that you can always add your comments and questions in the chat window, and we'll be happy to address them as we get into Q&A, okay? Our typical disclaimer, okay? We are trying to be in touch and also capture as much guidance from the granting agencies as possible. As you know, you're now in the new grant season and lots of things are moving and changing. As much as we try to keep up with all the information that's coming out of the government, both state and federal, please, if we misstate something, if new information comes up, we're not perfect, but we always try to be on top of the latest information as much as we can. So this is just a disclaimer for you to remember that if we missed something, please do get back to us, speak with your regional security director, and just make sure you address your concerns. I figured that the best way to explain how implementation and commissioning works is borrowing from our good friend Dolph Horowitz, who unfortunately is not with us today, but he'll be back, is the sequencing approach. So if you look at this, this is basically a process sequence. From left to right, you will see the various steps of the implementation and commissioning process. You will notice that I broke it out into several steps, okay? And so we'll cover each and every one of them. But please remember, this is why I've been saying all along, in a lot of our webinars, that project management skills are very, very important. And this is where they come under the test and scrutiny, that if you're able to manage these types of projects, if you're able to find somebody who is very good at project management, that's a big plus. We very much appreciate and respect everybody in the community who's able to support the organizations that they're part of and contribute, and all of you here today are all contributing, and we're very grateful for that. But keep in mind that all of these steps require pretty decent project management experience. If you have any questions after this, please remember to ask them in the chat, and also after this webinar is concluded, to get back to us with any questions or concerns so we can help you navigate, okay? So we'll take it step by step, okay? As you have awarded the project, okay, imagine all of the steps have happened. You've had your RFP, you've had your ads being placed, you've found the contractors. And in this particular case, I'll try to steer a little bit closer to electronic security systems or security technologies. Obviously, some of the steps will not be applicable if you're looking for training services or security officers and security guards. A majority of these apply throughout the different scopes of work. Formal announcements to the winning and losing bidders is a way of formally stating that the bid process has been completed, the award has been made. And why did I mention losing bidders? Because look, you never know. You might be working with those firms in the future, right? So it's only fair. They've invested their time in producing relatively good bids. or maybe excellent bids, and you just happen to have selected another company, which is great, no problem. But please be kind and respectful to those bidders and explain to them why they lost. Sometimes it's purely on price. Sometimes you didn't like their project management capabilities. Sometimes they weren't as responsive as they should have been. All of those are valid points. Please share them with the losing bidders so that next time they'll understand that you actually take these things seriously and not just award and move on and never share feedback with the losing bidders. You're not out of the woods yet in terms of moving on with the project until you have submitted your project justification and request for project approval to the granting agency. Okay, you can't move on with the work until you've said and demonstrated to the granting agency that, for one, you've awarded the bid, you have shared with them your bid scoring matrix and justification why you awarded to a specific company. Sometimes it's very price sensitive, but sometimes you have other qualifiers or disqualifiers that made you choose a specific bidder, right? So that needs to go to the granting agency. And I always field this question from the community, and year after year, people ask me, okay, so what's the package? What am I supposed to submit? I can tell you that as many times as I've tried to comprehend what the package is, it's not all straightforward. So the best way to understand and to actually find out what the package should be is to speak with your grant rep, especially in this particular grant season or post-award after this grant season. Make sure you speak with the grant rep because a lot of the rules are being updated, they're changing, some of them are being relaxed and some of them are being tightened. So we at CSI cannot fully speak about the specific package of justification documents that you need to present in order for your projects to be approved. So please coordinate that with your grant rep at the granting agency. Any contractor that's worth their salt will likely request a deposit. Okay? Imagine you thinking in terms of needing to proceed and the bidder saying, yeah, thanks for awarding it to me. We're really eager to start, but my contract says that you need to pay me a deposit for me to be able to mobilize. So please be aware that as much as possible, those resources and finances need to have been arranged in advance so that you're not delayed with paying for mobilization. So make sure that you've signed the contracts, you've basically went through all the formalities after the award, and that you are ready to start the project and also make these payments quickly. There certainly will be a moment when everybody on the team, including the winning bidder, will need to sort of kick off the project, if you will. We'll get into that in the next section, but please remember that schedules change. Some things come up that you anticipated the project can be done in, let's say, 4 weeks, but now other things have happened around the services that your organization provides to the community, and you're no longer able to accommodate the 4-week schedule. You might need to do it in 6 or 8 weeks, okay? Or you might need to do it in less than 4 weeks, right? So please make sure to coordinate your schedule internally and also with the winning bidder. So moving on, and I apologize again. I must say, because we only have a finite time, I'm not able. This could take 5-6 hours, right? So again, I'll try my best to elaborate on these points, but if any questions arise, start adding them to the chat, and also please later on follow up with us at CSI, with your regional security directors. Project kickoff. Why do I use that term? Because it's easy to have signed the contract, paid the deposit, and basically wave a hand and say, okay, you, the contractor, go for it. So normal contractors that have a good experience in the industry, they typically will say, well, no, let's just not be so fast about it. Why don't we figure out what you have available for us? So that's why the first bullet is internal planning. What if the contractor needs to store some equipment on site? Do you have space available? What kind of spaces will be affected by the project, right? So for example, you might have let's say a sanctuary, you might have, let's say children's program spaces, you might have meeting rooms and so on and so forth. Or you might have outdoor spaces that will also be affected by the project. So these spaces, which are affected by the project, require isolation. They require some sort of schedule adjustments and reduced use or no use whatsoever for any functions that you have at the facility, right? So all of those space impacts need to be arranged in advance, understood, and coordinated, right? Communication with both internal stakeholders, like for example, if there's a teacher that works with kids, let's say between certain hours at your facility, right? In that room, the classroom where the teacher is providing those services is not going to be available because it's going to be occupied by this project, right? For the next, I don't know, 3-4 weeks on a rolling schedule, right? So you need to explain and coordinate those activities in advance so everybody's on the same page. Otherwise, the contractor may be aware that they need to start work. They will walk into this classroom saying, here's our equipment, we're ready to go. And there's a class going on with kids and the teacher. And basically, they can't really start because the space is not available. So please keep that in mind. Okay, and of course, there's resource allocation that needs to be made available. Resources could be very simple, human beings at your facility who will be working with the contractor and establishing an ongoing communication with them and so on and so forth. So that needs to be all arranged. There could be additional resources, like for example, sometimes the contractors will say, well, where is our power access? Right? Where are the power outlets? You might say it's right in the room, or for some spaces, there might need to be a different type of power connection. Okay, so please keep that in mind as well. I included a photo here. So take a look at this, this photo. It's an image with all sorts of yellow, green, and red horizontal lines and some other icons. This is a typical view of a project schedule. Okay, it will have the tasks on the left, which need to be completed in sequential order or in overlapping order sometimes. Then you have the start and finish dates. Then you'll have the completion percentage. Then you have, let's say, days late, for example. There could be additional columns added to this, but any online search will produce a lot of different ways in which a project schedule could be put together. Bottom line is, you want to know how much time you're allocating for different types of tasks. There are easy tools that could be used that look very similar to what I'm showing here to manage your schedule. Why am I asking for managing the schedule? Because people forget. Somebody coordinated something and it might be sitting somewhere either in text messages or emails, and there's no formal record to hold everybody responsible and accountable to certain times and to certain schedules and milestones. Having to wear multiple hats within your organizations, I'm sure you realize that it gets daunting. So if you have a central point of reference that helps align the tasks and demonstrate to you what the schedule is, even if you're running a bit late, or even if you're a bit ahead of the schedule. That's the reference point for everybody on the team, the contractor and your team internally, to refer to. You can change this. You can say, you know what, we're not going to meet this date, so we're going to move it. Fine, no problem. But keep in mind, you move one date, several other subsequent dates might move as well, because the implementation of further tasks may be directly dependent on completion of earlier tasks. So it's also important, and that's why, again, this is part of Project Kickoff. It's also important to speak about scope confirmation. Okay, what are we all doing? What's the scope of the project? Just to remind everyone, and as well as internal stakeholders and the bidder and the project manager, whoever is involved in this, it's always good to sit down and just discuss. Personal experience. I'm sitting at the table with a contractor on a huge project, and we've gone months evaluating these contractors, and they demonstrated to us that they've understood the project very well, okay? And we have awarded the bid. The contractor comes in for the kickoff meeting, we start discussing scope, and they're like, wait, you told us that we're not doing this. You should have seen the faces of several people at the table, including myself. I was the project manager of it. And I'm looking at them like, guys, you just won it. What do you mean you don't understand? Right? Now, this was in this, like in the early days of when I was getting into project management. So I was shocked, but later on I learned that, look, these contractors, they do multiple bids, and sometimes they take risks in demonstrating that they've understood. But what if it's a new person that's stepping in as a project manager on their side, and they might have misunderstood something? This is the perfect time to say, okay, no problem. Let's review this one more time. To reiterate that you don't want any change orders. You don't want them to amend the scope. You have a finite budget available. This is the type of work that needs to be done. Okay. The more information you could share with everybody so that everybody's on the same page, the smoother your project will go. Why? Because it's not a rare occurrence when in the middle of the project, half of the system is installed, half still is waiting to be installed. A contractor turns around and starts pointing fingers at everybody, saying, well, I can't complete my job, or I cannot move on to the next tasks because somebody did something, okay? That is the time to reflect and ask yourself, well, did we ever discuss the scope? So sometimes the earlier you discuss it and make sure that everybody's on the same page, and you record that everybody's on the same page, right? Then it's much easier to move on with the project, because if 2 months later somebody starts pointing fingers, you can always say, look, no problem. We have a record of our conversation. We looked through the scope. Everybody signed off. We're good. So why are you bringing this question up? You should know what you're doing. Because these types of disagreements sometimes end up in additional financial demands or delays or both. So I would caution you to do these things well in advance before the bulk of the work is done. Sometimes vendors may ask for additional site walkthroughs because they're trying to be fast when they produce their bids. So sometimes they'll miss a few things, okay? So for them to mobilize, for them to be able to deliver the work properly, they sometimes need to spend a couple more hours with their team just to walk the site. And it's good that if somebody from your team can be available just to help them navigate, right? What's what at the facility. Last but not least, now I've marked it red. This item, it says preparation of prefabrication submittals. This is the technical terminology. I apologize. But this is the technical term that all contractors understand. Very few in the security industry, particularly in our community, are able to produce. But those who can, actually, they're worth their weight in gold, because prefabrication submittals is the best way to demonstrate the contractor's understanding of the project. This is when they produce the drawings to you, where they demonstrate where all the devices will go. They produce to you the product literature, again, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that what equipment is being installed, and additional documentation. If at all possible, on technology implementation projects, you should be requesting this type of information. I have been made aware multiple times that I sometimes go overboard, and sometimes even the project managers at individual facilities, your peer facilities, and sometimes even the CSI team will look at me and say, look, this is great. We would love for all projects to run this way, but very few contractors are actually willing to do this. Fine. What I suggest is make sure that you've confirmed scope with them in writing before they start the work. Okay, one way or another. Where all the devices will go, you might want to do those site walkthroughs if the prefabrication submittals are not accessible, and let's say it's not going to be done. I understand it's a risk, but you can manage this by having other documents that record how and with what pace and by what, within what dates the project will be installed, and particularly where all the devices will go. It's very important to have that record, because look, time passes and everybody starts forgetting, right? Even if the project is midway, let's say, right? So having those records of agreements of what's being done and at what pace and when and by whom and whatever, just make sure that you have something to show for, because you don't want to have those arguments with vendors, especially when it comes time to pay their next bill. So, pre-install review. There is always a period of time when contractors will ask additional clarifying questions. Please don't be annoyed by that. Good contractors will always take that step. They even after they've done the field assessment, if they've done their site walkthroughs, sometimes those questions will be raised during site walkthroughs. That's perfectly fine. Make sure that you're there to quickly answer their questions, because you want as little of uncertainty as possible as the project starts moving forward, especially when the equipment starts being installed. Again, marking it in red. I understand, again, this might be too technical and too complex a matter, but if there is a chance that you understand and can request a review of prefabrication submittals so that you have the time to approve what's going to be installed on site, that's great. If you cannot, just make sure that you have some alternative documentation of where all devices will go, and product literature and the rest of the stuff that you need to understand and pass along as the project moves on. And of course, there will be, again, schedule coordination only begins at this point, so there will be more stages of the project that you will have to coordinate schedule. Not everything moves exactly within the dates that you've allocated at the beginning of the project. You will reach a point where the contractors will start their mobilization. What does mobilization mean? So I'm trying to depict this on this image here. So imagine there's a piece of machinery that needs to do the work. How do you think it's going to be delivered there? It needs to be brought in some way and then staged out on site until it reaches the actual point of where the installation will take place, right? Then you have some peripheral equipment, right? The portable power equipment. You'll have tools. You'll have all sorts of additional material that will have to be staged somewhere. It will have to sit somewhere in boxes until it's been mounted somewhere. So please remember that contractors will help guide you with what they need. They might tell you, well, I'll need a couple of rooms where I could store this stuff. And we could move that equipment along if we have to make installation in that room. But please keep giving us a little bit of real estate inside your facility so we could store our equipment, okay? And keep in mind, when contractors leave for the day, let's say they're done. It's the end of the day, and they will come back to you tomorrow. Where do you think they're going to leave their tools? The tools are going to be sitting on site, most likely, right? They're not going to take all of them with them. And particularly equipment. Some of the security technologies and the security hardware will still sit on site. So you got to be able to lock it up. You got to be able to coordinate where it's going to be stored. Like I said, site prep, delivery of materials, equipment staging, all of those things take place. Imagine you're painting your house, right? You wouldn't want the painter to walk into your house, into your living room and start just rolling paint all over your walls, right? They would have to lay some plastic on the floor. They'd have to cover up maybe some pieces of furniture. That is all part of the site preparation and mobilization, okay? So this image I actually found to be quite interesting, because if you remember, the Empire State Building was built in record time for its day, if you will. And even by today's standards, its construction took less time than anticipated. But there will be progress as the work on site continues. So you will at first see a lot of disarray, because some equipment and cabling will be all loose, and there will be a lot of stuff moving around. To an untrained eye, it all looks like somebody's making a huge mess, okay? But little by little, you will see that if the contractor is doing a good job, all the cables will have been bundled and properly stored and properly lined along the walls or in trays and what have you. All of the equipment will have been mounted with the covers, and it will look much more neat. And of course, there are 2 points here that need to be addressed all the time during the implementation. Supervision. and issues management. So because I've been to, a number of construction sites where we were doing supervision, and the moment I walk in the morning, somebody runs up to me from the contractor team and they're like, Ilya, we have a major problem. I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, well, 3 of our guys are late. The power outlet that we were using is being used by somebody else. And the products that we were hoping to install today, the hardware hasn't been delivered yet. So several people are responsible for it, not so much yourself as the project manager, but you need to start facilitating this, okay? And so there is a degree of involvement from someone to oversee these types of issues. And it should be expected. It's not like the contractors want to constantly delay and cause you trouble. Not at all. They want to get on with the completion of this project as much as you do. But that's how construction is done. There are challenges, there are coordination items, supervision is required, like I said, just to point the contractors in the right direction. Sometimes the contractor, I've been on a project where contractors started working in an area that was completely outside of the scope, and there was supposed to be a meeting taking place in that area within a couple of hours. And the contractors walk in and they start prepping the place for paint. We're like, no, you can't. This is outside of scope. So if there is no such supervision, issues will arise. Okay. So the more quickly you can deal with them, the better off you'll be. Take a look at these 2 images. So this is probably, if you remember nothing else from today's presentation, I obviously will, like I said, we're recording it, so you can always come back to it to remind yourself. But check this out. Do you think that this is a rare occurrence, these 2 photos? So I have a rhetorical question. You could put your answers in the chat, or you could give your own examples if you want, no problem. But here's what I see, okay? I see this type of poor workmanship all the time. This is not new, okay? And guess what? I said to you, supervision in the previous slide, right? If there is no supervision, that's the quality you're likely to receive. Okay, you're basically leaving the entire quality control in the hands of the contractor. And sometimes it's difficult for a client who doesn't understand anything about security or networking or how neatly equipment needs to be installed to even recognize these types of issues. But the more you discuss these things with the peer community, the more sites you visit, the more kind of conversations you have, and the more you insist with the contractor that you want good quality implementation, installation, and the quality of workmanship, right? The better off you'll be. And don't forget, we have a full library of conditions like these at CSI, because our guys and our team are going out all the time and they're seeing these things firsthand. So if ever you need any examples of what doesn't look right or what does look right, we have some additional examples. Neither of these photos passes the test. Okay, one is very obvious with the cameras. It's a complete disaster. Okay, I would never even, like, the moment I see this, I typically turn to the contractor and say, whoever installed it, I don't want them on my site. I don't want that type of quality to be even present. I don't want people making choices for this type of quality here. Okay, so get them off, get somebody else and fix it. And the security closets where the security head-end equipment goes, right, where the lower photo, right, that can also be a hidden problem. It may not rear its ugly head during the installation, but after the installation, when the closets are set up in that terrible manner, right, you will have maintenance problems and connectivity problems and all sorts of other challenges. So again, progress inspections on site, which is what this is dedicated to, are super important. Just, imagine like you would be hiring an installer to work at your own house, right? What kind of quality would you expect, right? It would have to be neat. It would have to look presentable, right? So, and please, like I said, you're not in a vacuum. You can always reach out to CSI and ask questions. Look, I have this. Does this pass the test? Is it right? And we have like I said, a huge library to make reference to. Again, the photo here only depicts a video surveillance user interface. Okay, this is what typical users of video surveillance systems will see on their computer screen. Okay, so take a look at how many different options and features just this one interface demonstrates. Okay, so needless to say that when the systems are tested, they have to be tested based on what you as a user or a user team expect. So before a contractor can tell you, oh, I've tested the systems, everything looks great. No, 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 no. You can't, as a contractor, test the systems to your liking. It has to be tested to the user's liking. So make sure that there is enough supervision and guidance for those systems to be calibrated in the way that they will be used. And keep in mind, one thing that Dov, myself, and the rest of the CSI team support, this concept of high quality user experience. It has to be designed. Everything has to be designed for ease of use. If it's not easy to use, most likely you will not be using it. And most likely, like majority of these features, you'll even forget that they exist if they're not easy to use. So make sure, and that's why I called it kind of the starting point here, is that this is the moment of truth, when the contractor has the early opportunity to demonstrate that they're actually calibrating everything correctly. Okay, and if something doesn't sit well with you as the user, it doesn't meet your expectations, you can ask as many questions as you want to make sure that everything works the way you want, right? So that's the earliest time when you can start coordinating that with the integrators. And again, quality control, calibration, issues management, and then repetition of your coordination will be required after each of these system tests. And then we start slowly but surely getting to project handover. Again, this is another moment of truth because contractors typically like walking off projects very quickly. They're like, oh, we installed everything. All the devices are mounted. So we have given you instruction manuals. We may have given you a couple hours of training. So goodbye. Not so fast. Not so fast. Okay. Project handover is the most crucial time when you start as the user team, when you start asking questions. Well, does the system in its fullest to its fullest extent, does the system work for me? Does it do what I ask? Does it respond to my needs? And if some of the parts of the system don't, this is the time to tell the contractor, you're not done yet, and I'm not going to pay your final bill. Because if the system is not easy to use, if it's missing some features, if it's not calibrated correctly, right? You need to coordinate that with the contractor, and don't let any contractor tell you, yeah, but we didn't sign up for that. Absolutely incorrect, because every manufacturer of equipment, right, will always be certifying these contractors to make sure that they have calibrated those systems to the user's liking. So if you are getting some challenges with the contractors, you might call the manufacturer, and you might just tell them, listen, these guys are not willing to calibrate the system for us, right? And there will be a conversation between the manufacturer and the contractor. Now, in most cases, I surely hope it doesn't get to that. Nobody wants these types of frictions, but the sooner you coordinate and the more you reiterate with the contractor that the handover can only happen when the systems perform to our liking, that's wonderful, because then the contractors will start asking you questions. How do you want it to be set up? Does this look okay? Does this work to your liking? So there will be less friction when you are ready to take the system and start using it. Now, even when the contractors hand over the systems to you, okay, and let's say you've signed the final documents that you need to have signed to begin what's called beneficial use. So basically, the system is completed with its installation. It's fully calibrated. You like it. You've gone through a couple of rounds of testing, and it now works. That still keeps the contractor on the hook for a variety of things. First of all, you will have, inevitably, you will have some additional feedback as you begin to explore more and more features of the system. And as the system starts giving you more and more feedback, okay? Sometimes I've seen where a video surveillance camera has performed excellently during the handover inspection. And then as you start using it, the focus starts drifting, the positioning is a little bit off. So you need to call the contractor and say, guys, it's not working. So something is wrong here. We didn't touch it. So they have to make sure that they address those challenges for you as quickly as you can. And this is another point to advocate for both the very well-written maintenance agreements and also keeping contractors honest when it comes to warranty service, okay? Because they owe you that. Even though the project from a implementation perspective is done, but that doesn't mean that they are completely off the hook. So yes, there will be, again, a lot of bureaucracy involved here because you'll have to make final payments. You'll also have to submit for a grant reimbursement request, which means, again, and once again, I'll repeat myself, we can give you only so much guidance as far as what those grant reimbursement requests should look like. By we, I mean us at the CSI team, right? I would strongly recommend that you first coordinate with your grant rep to see what it is that they require in order for you to pass the test and get the reimbursement approved, okay? There will be a set of documents. Now, like I said, for technology implementation projects, there is one set of documents. If you've hired security guards, that's a different set of documents. If you've hired somebody for training, different set of documents. And those sets could be more or less complex. So just, again, coordinate with your grant rep. And if there's something we can address for you, don't hesitate. We'll do our best. But your best bet here is coordination with your grant rep. There is also a process here that's called defect rectification. Again, a technical term, but it's a very widely used industry term among contractors and among their clients. What does that mean? You will be using the system. You will be using the various types of security hardware, right? Well, some of it may have had manufacturing defects that will come out only after implementation. Some of it will just maybe be damaged by something that is out of your control. So that is the time, again, to coordinate with the contractors to make sure that they can respond quickly if there are any system defects. Sometimes they may have installed, let's say, a video recording device or a computer workstation, but it works fine for 3 months and then it stops working. It's still within the warranty period, but there's a defect in it. So the contractor is responsible for fixing it as quickly as possible. Again, typically high-end projects request contractors to delineate what is their response time. Typically, it's no more than 4 hours. So you have an issue, you call the contractor, you expect them to be on site or help you remotely within 4 hours from your call. Okay, that is the standard. Sometimes for more critical pieces of these systems, you might want to ask for a 2-hour response time, but coordinate that in advance with the contractor. And again, there will always be a need to calibrate these systems. Don't just think these are plug and play. Unfortunately, as you're hearing the CSI team tell you that even the threats are dynamic, right? We had one kind of set of threats before October the 7th. And then after October the 7th, we have a slightly different set of threats. Okay, so situations change, the threat environment changes, right? So your system will have to be calibrated. What if there was an incident a couple blocks away? Nothing happened for years, but now there is an incident. So your systems will have to be changed, operationally. So that calibration can be done with 2 parties. One is the contractor that installed the system, in that particular part of the system, and with the manufacturer. So always have those 2 points of contact available to you. Like I said, warranty support, there will be training typically provided before the handover, but If you need additional training, you can always ask for it. Sometimes it's free of charge because a manufacturer can do it remotely for you, or they could send a couple of videos for you to review, or something is available online, fine. But sometimes additional training is needed on site. So that typically incurs additional charges, but you might have an agreement that training might be included with the extended maintenance agreement. Not sure, up to you. And of course, there will be communication requirements and coordination requirements after the systems are installed. Why? So it might seem like a trivial point here. However, please remember, anytime you upgrade your security controls, I don't care what they are. They could be, lock on locking devices on a couple of doors. It could be adding a couple of security officers. It could be adding a couple of cameras. It could be adding blast film and what have you, right? Every time you upgrade your security controls or change the way they operate, you have to look at your policies and procedures in relation to those changes. Okay, so let's say you move the security officer from one door to another. Why did you do that? And now what is their new set of tasks? It might be different from a different post where they were. So all of that requires updates, because as time passes, right, there might be a very good awareness of how everything works in the first couple of months after the project is implemented, after the new security controls are in place. But a year from that time, if no documentation exists, if no policies and procedures exist, right? A year from now, you won't remember, and nobody will remember, and people will start pointing fingers, right? You don't want to get stuck in that situation. Always try to record. You implemented these controls. How do they work? Who needs to oversee them? Who is the user group? And if a change occurs, record that change. And this is when we arrive at the final point here, which is the test of contractors' quality and integrity. I'm a strong believer that the best way to tell whether a contractor is good is when they stop implementation. Now, of course, I mean, it might sound very, very out of sequence to you and unusual, but here's the thing. You got paid. Let's say I'm a contractor. I got paid. All the money is in the bank. I have a ton of other projects that are going on, right? So because contractors are busy, right? How much time am I dedicating to this client, your team, that I just completed this project for? Or let's say half a year from now. How much time am I dedicating to maintaining client relationship? If you notice that the contractor has walked off site and hasn't spoken to you or checked in with you, at least on a monthly basis, you should call them up and say, guys, we might not use you again because you don't stay in touch. And don't let them complain that there's nothing to stay in touch about. They should be continually checking in with you and building that client relationship. Okay, that's the part, that's when you can see who's a good quality contractor with high levels of integrity, that they have the relationship building skill set, and that they can follow up on their existing clients and see how things are going and offer them the tools and resources. And the contractors who are willing to get paid, walk off the job and do nothing else for an extended period of time. We can open up to questions and answers. Yeah, I saw a couple of comments here. Maybe I'll read this one. Yeah, after the bid process completes, I add 2 weeks to complete final negotiations with the winning bidder before announcing to losing bidders. This way, if anything happens in the negotiations on details, we have a recourse. Yeah, smart, fantastic. I like your approach. But like I said, as long as you're communicating across the entire set of bidders, it's completely your choice what the right timing is. Good point.
Right. Here we have, what experience have you had with material delays and the impact on the schedule?
Tons of experience. I've done my claim to fame, just again to reiterate, is probably the biggest project I've done in New York City is the renovation of the United Nations headquarters on 1st and 42nd. And so I was responsible for security design for of all of the features that you today see. You see the vehicle bollards and the fences and video surveillance and gates and everything else, and the blast wall and the Secretariat building, all of that stuff was done by myself and my colleagues. Now, the sooner you get awareness by coordinating with the contractor, with the winning bidder, as to their ability to procure materials and deliver them on site, the better off you'll be. Now, if it happens during your project kickoff, fantastic. Let them come back to you as soon as possible. As soon as you've cleared all of the administrative hurdles, especially having the project approved by your grant rep, yeah, get those schedules right up there. And you have to align how the products will be available, not to your liking, but what the contractor can actually accommodate. Okay, so sometimes you may have expected that, yeah, in 2 weeks I'll have my video surveillance cameras, but the contractor says, no, this particular brand, we're going to be 3 weeks out. Okay, fine. What else can we do? What other tasks can be can replace the video surveillance installation or installation of those components in the meantime? So that is where you can start making changes and adjustments to your schedule. However, in some cases, yes, there might be some delays. Most important piece is when everybody communicates. When everybody communicates to explain why those delays are happening. And yes, people do make mistakes. Okay, that's just in New York City in particular. Like, I haven't seen a contractor that has made mistakes with delivery of goods. That's the way it is, right? Because they're dependent on their supply chain, and sometimes, especially with high-end technologies, this equipment is coming from overseas. It has to clear the port. It's all sorts of different challenges. So the sooner you have figured out how long, what the lead times will be, the better off you will be. And yes, please keep updating the schedule as much as you can to compensate so that with different tasks, so that the project can keep moving forward. Sometimes, like I said, for example, a security integrator says, we're going to do video first, and this was on your schedule, but the video is delayed, the entire system or components of the system. Fine. You were supposed to do access control. Can you do access control first? And that's how you negotiate and coordinate. Okay.
So we have a couple more questions.
Thank you.
How would an organization deal with unexpected costs? If a vendor says cost has gone up or requires more personnel, how would that work in terms of having awarded the vendor at a specific price?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. And this is, again, this goes back to the issues with change orders. Change order is a typical request to increase the pricing or get additional money for new scope, if you will. Now, to every client that I've worked with, particularly in your community, I always recommend that in your contracts, you have a clause that says there will be no change orders. So you basically telling the contractor, you bid the project, you gave me your calculations for staff, you gave me your calculations for unit prices, for system implementation, for cabling, for labor hours, whatever, okay? You own it. So whatever changes you're making later on in order to meet the schedule, it's on you. So typically, that is part of the award communication, okay? So when you're discussing the decision to award with two different contractors, that should be part of your upfront communication with them to say no change orders. We'll make it formal. The best way to do it is to have a clause in the contract that says no change orders, unless we cause the change order. So yes, sometimes clients do cause change orders. They might say, sorry, we cannot do work in this area. Things have changed. We have children's classes. Nobody can disrupt that. It will last for the next 3 weeks. And the contractor says, fine, but I've allocated the personnel for this duration. So now I'm going to have to, this affects my other projects. So I will be charging you extra fees for their time. And also storage of materials and so on and so forth. That's okay. Have a review. And if you are not able to mitigate that, that's the cost you're going to have to pay. But that's at least you've caused it. You know what you're doing. in most cases, contractors will find something in the corner and say, well, this wasn't part of the project. Well, sorry, refer to clause number something, something that says you own the job with no change orders.
So we have a couple more. We had a winning bidder that was using manufactured manufactured equipment and we had to reset. Is there a list of approved equipment available to avoid this issue?
Absolutely. Thank you again for asking this. And I'll have to say, this question pops up very, very often. Why does it pop up? Because more and more Chinese manufacturers are getting banned. So don't think that you're missing something. It's just the US government is slowly but surely taking additional Chinese manufacturers and adding them to the banned list. So that list is available. Please reach out to your CSI regional director for that information. You can also online, if you're willing to do it yourself, you could check it online. I think it's the ban is governed by the law that's called NDAA, National Defense Assistance Act, something like that. But it typically has all the brands, but what you also have to coordinate is whoever the vendor is that's trying to sell you that equipment, they have to certify to you before they're awarded that none of this equipment is banned by US government. Otherwise, you're not going to get paid by through the grant funds. So whenever there's any banned equipment that's being proposed to you, that's part of the grant funded project, run from it like immediately, okay, and tell the vendor like you shouldn't have proposed it in the first place because they already should know that's a big no-no. Okay, so I hope that answers the question, but please do reach out to us after this webinar and we'll help guide you forward.
I believe this is the last question. Do you recommend we have penalties in the contract for the vendor failure to deliver on time deliver on time on quality?
On time, yes. On quality needs to be more clearly defined. Like, what do you mean by quality? Okay, so this is where, and again, we're having this internal discussion within CSI, to what extent we arm you with more complicated documents, like proper specifications will have quality statements, but they're too technical. Okay, so we always hesitate to share proper equipment specifications with you so that you can pass them on to the vendors. Okay, I've written them and we have a library of them sitting around. The problem is that for a person who's not knowledgeable about construction and about security technologies, it's very challenging to give that document so that they can understand it. Okay, not our fault. This is the language that is used in the industry, but it needs competent project managers to use that. Now, I very much recommend. I wouldn't call it penalties, but we'd call them service level agreements, whatever, just to make sure that timelines are met and that the quality is defined based on your coordination with the contractor. Make sure that's included and well discussed between yourself and the bidding vendor.
I believe that was the last question. I'm not sure of anything else to add, but that was the last question.
Look, Jamie, thank you so very much for keeping me honest, because I sometimes lose track of all the incoming texts and communication. Thank you for that. And Seth, thank you for opening. Thank you to all of you who joined today. Please remember, all of these are recorded and will very shortly be posted on our website as well as on our YouTube playlists. If something isn't unclear, because like I said, we try to deliver it as in as plain a language as we can, but sometimes we use some terminology that may be unfamiliar to you. Please do reach out to us, and if you need guidance, we're here to help. Thank you for your time.